Good afternoon. It is February the 12th, Abraham Lincoln's birthday. And today I decided I'd drive down to the Lincoln Homestead just outside of Linville, Virginia. And there's an event happening at the grave of some of Abraham Lincoln's ancestors. If you didn't know, the Lincoln family lived in Pennsylvania, then immigrated to Virginia, migrated, traveled, moved, whatever you want to say. Migrated down to Virginia, to the Shenandoah Valley. That's like the Lincoln origin story, right? Pennsylvania, Virginia, Kentucky, Illinois, DC. So we're going to check it out, see what we can see. There's already a decent amount of people up there. So let's go see what we can see. It's a beautiful rainy day.
I don't know. We turned it into a happen. Oh, good. Well, we're going to do the ceremony today for the 49th time. I was a kid when we started. Feel a little older now. But after 49 years, I can tell you this day is about as good as it gets. Everybody who's been here several times knows that. And so we're happy that it's as good as it is. I want to say thanks to Ben and Sarah Bixel. I don't think Sarah's right there. Good to see you, Sarah. Who owned this place. And make us feel very welcome here. Many of you have been here multiple times know that. You've heard me tell this story, those of you who've heard me talk about this before, that it was a day like this in a sense, except worse, and a snow out on the ground, and it was such a whiteout that you couldn't see. And John and I were waiting for the 2 o'clock to come so that we could have the ceremony. The only 2 of us were still ready. And we saw a figure coming through the pasture there from the house. Top hat, cape, tall, dark figure. And I looked at it for a moment and I punched John. I said, John, do you see that? He said, I'm really glad you do. Because we both thought we'd just been out in the cold too long. It turned out to be a guy who played Abraham Lincoln in the local schools, heard about our ceremony when he was in Charlottesville and decided to come over and surprise us. Let me ask if any who's here and what connection with over there, President Lincoln. There are 5 generations of Lincolns buried in this cemetery. From 1768, before the American Revolution, until just 2 or 3 years ago, we had Lincolns here by the name of Lincoln from that family. The last one died in 2020, and no descendants. So we know we're not going to have more Lincolns by that name. It's harder to chase down the women's names because a lot of times there were no marriage licenses preserved in the courthouse. We didn't always know when their family name changed, that kind of thing. It's just hard to do the research. We do have a little information, but not a lot. So there are 5 generations. Let me tell you who they are. Over in the far corner are the markers, picking who they are, for Virginia John Lincoln and his wife Rebecca, who came here in 1768 with their 9 children. They are the great-grandparents of President Lincoln. So they came here, and for John Lincoln, he lived 20 years here and died. His farm was across past this modern house here, and the next farm, which was my farm at one time, my son lives on that. That was the Virginia John farm. He owned this too, but that's where his home was. And Virginia John Lincoln lived there. When he died, his house eventually burned. His daughter, his wife, moved out and actually lived in the homestead for a while. And she's buried here. She lived another 20 years. So she lived here about 40 years. So they had significant presence in this community. They are the great-grandparents of the president. Among the 9 children was President Lincoln's grandfather, Abraham, for whom he was named. He was a captain in the American Revolution, so we call him Captain Abraham. It's really important to put these titles in front of them because there are about 50 Abrahams. And you just have to tell them apart by giving them titles, whether they own them or not. Yes, we did. It's marked at the grave, it's marked, his brother's grave is marked over here. Captain Abraham was the oldest of the family. He's the president's grandfather. He was 24 and single when he came here. He bought 200 acres of the 600 acres that John Lincoln owned here, his father owned, and included this farm, and or the farm that's next to it, and built a house down in the flat on the creek. That always needed to be where the water was, down at the creek, and married a local person named Bathsheba Herring. Now, we've never had to worry about giving her a title because they've never repeated that name. I don't know why, but they have. So Bathsheba is the only one I know about. But anyway, Bathsheba, his grandmother, was a Herring, very prominent family here. And Bathsheba and Captain Abraham had 5 children, all here. And so down in that little place down there just below us here, it's where our president's father, Tom Lincoln, was born. When Tom Lincoln was a little boy, the family moved out to Kentucky, and that's where you pick up the Lincoln story in Kentucky. Captain Abraham only lived about 6 or 7 years after he moved away from here because he was killed in an Indian attack. In fact, the story is told that his oldest son, Mordecai, ran to get a rifle when the Indians attacked because they were just about ready to kill Thomas, his younger brother. History would have changed probably if he got tomahawked into his head. And so he shot that person and killed him. Anyway, that's where he ended up. Tom Lincoln grew up out there. It was a time of primogeniture, which meant that the oldest son inherited everything except the dower rights of his mother. So Thomas had no name, no father, no education, no inheritance. People wondered why he didn't amount to more. He actually had a pretty good life if people care about it. Go see the times he served on juries and highway commissions, things like that. He did a really pretty good job. But this is the president's grandfather I'm talking about, who was a brother of the Homestead builder. That grandfather lived here, moved to Kentucky. The family stayed in Kentucky until he moved to Indiana and on to Illinois. And of course, the president was from Illinois, was elected president. The president knew about his connections here, and so he wrote letters to his cousins who lived here. And I'll come back to that in just a minute. One of the other 9 children was one called John Jr., who was for a long time the clerk of the Turleytown Baptist Church, which is over on the ridge across over there. About it's pretty good when you sit over there. Probably up there across the street. And that got physically moved down toward Broadway years ago. It's one of the oldest churches in the valley. It was here about 1740, and all the minutes for about 30 years are in John Lincoln Jr.'s handwriting. He was the clerk of the church. So he moved, was older, moved to be with adult children out behind, died out there, so he's not very good. One of the other of those 9 children was Jacob Lincoln. And Jacob Lincoln is the Homestead builder. He's a brother of the president's grandfather, so he's a great uncle. And Jacob was a wealthy guy. When you think about Abraham Lincoln being born in a hovel, this house was already 8 or 9 years old. So the Lincolns back here were not hurting. In fact, one of the clocks that came out of that house is in the Abbey Aldrich Rockefeller Museum in Williamsburg, and it's probably worth several $100,000. It's extraordinary antique. It was in the Homestead because they had furniture, mantles, and clocks, that kind of thing, made for them. And the house itself, we didn't do a lot of columns and plantation looks over here in the valley. It's a much simpler look. But that house, not only is it all brick, it has dental molding around the top. It once had a lovely portico. Years ago, that got changed. Wonderful floors. You've restored those beautifully, by the way. Way to go. And a lot of porcelain locks, things like that. That's there. I probably wish some of it was still there. It hadn't been sold out by Kate Pennybacker during the Depression. But it is a lovely house, and they have it open from time to time for open house. So keep your eye on their website, and they'll announce it and let you know when you can come in and take a look. But Jacob Lincoln, about 1800, also in the American Revolution, his grave is marked here as a veteran of the American Revolution by the SAR. And Jacob Lincoln, as I say, was a homestead builder. These Lincolns, unlike the people almost everywhere else, had not only a lot of children, but healthy children who grew to adulthood. Now, here there are a couple of graves of some of the descendants of Linville, but these families had 9, 10, 11, 12, and all of them lived to be adults. And it's just very limited when you think about the number of infant mortalities at that time. Anyway, Jacob Lincoln had several children, and I call them home builders because there are houses still here that their children built. This house in 1800 was built by Jacob Lincoln, Captain Jacob. He lived in it until he died in 1822. His wife, Dorcas Robinson, lived in it another few years until she died in 1840, at which time his son, Abraham, another one, Colonel Abraham, is buried here. He's married to a Mary. A lot of times people come and say, I didn't know Abraham married a Mary. So these are not the ones you think of. Yeah. But Colonel Abraham and his wife Mary moved into that house until he died in 1851. On the family tree, he was a first cousin to Tom Lincoln, the president's father. First cousin once removed to the president. So Colonel Abraham then moved into that house. His wife did not die until 1874. She was in it during the Civil War. She owned slaves. They would have been liberated by the Emancipation Proclamation. And the Confederate children, no exception to this. The Lincolns here were Confederates. And not one of them said, oh, well, my Lincoln cousin's president, I'll go north, or I'll support the North. A lady cut him into slack. There were several who served in the Confederate Army. One said he liked shooting, and so they were loyal Confederates. But they did know about their connection. Colonel Abraham had daughters, so that family name changed, obviously, with the marriages and the deaths of their marriages. And his daughters are buried here. Over here is Carolyn Amanda Brock, who was married to John Brock, who was an officer in the Civil War. And a couple of their children are buried here. Let's see, Dorcas Lavina, I think her name was, only lived a year, so she's buried here, an infant grave. Over the far side is Dorcas Sarah, I think her name is. She lived in 15, and she obviously had no descent, so she's buried there. And then there was another one, Rebecca Chapman, who's buried in Thorn Road Cemetery in Staunton, married to Dr. Chapman up there. Her only child died, and so they had no descendants after that. And the other one was Mary Elizabeth Catherine Lincoln, who, born in the Homestead, when she married, moved across the way up here, died across the road. Those of you who don't know where it is, but when you head up toward Harrisonburg, if you go that way, first big brick house on the right as you pass here a half mile or so is a Pennybacker place. And it's up in a grove of trees, so you have to look for it, over a little bridge and so forth. But she married a Maupin, Dr. Maupin, Kirk's relative, and they have graves here and also have infant graves here. After he died, he was a fairly young man when he died, although he was 10 or 11 years older than she was. She remarried, and she married a guy named Pennybacker, and hence the name of the house changed from Lincoln to Pennybacker. It was built by Jacob Lincoln Jr., one of the children of this man. So that's one of the houses I would call the Homestead Builders' children's houses. Another was in Newmarket. Those of you who go into Newmarket know where the big stoplight is in town, and the Shenandoah Valley Battlefield Foundation offices are right now. Used to be Stonewall Jackson headquarters. It was a hospital. It was a gift shop. It was a restaurant. It's been there a long time. It was built by Joseph Strayer, who married Dorcas Strayer out of this house. And so that's one of the other houses. Another one we could mention is, and these are all lived in. These are all really good houses. And the other one is down in Dayton, between Dayton and Bridgewater, lived in by Wangers today. And that house was built by the Kaufmans. Abigail was the youngest child of Jacob, and she married a Kaufman. Their son was in the Civil War. Interestingly enough, when you think about it, she was born in 1803 and died when she was about 85. Her granddaughter, think about it, from 1803, her granddaughter was here at this ceremony a few years ago. I said, no, you can't do the math. It's not possible. But it was. She's now deceased, but it's remarkable to have the granddaughter of one of the children for his house be here. She lived in Williamsburg. So anyway, those are the people that
take off. I just have to come over here and show the sun and maybe a closer look at the house. This is built by the president's great uncle. And a while ago, Harper and I came out, checked it out right before they started renovating. And it was in pretty rough shape, but pretty amazing. And like he said, the Bixlers, the family moved in and they completely renovated the place, or completely renovating it. And they built that barn, and they're building a house, a smaller house behind the house. It's pretty amazing. It's amazing to think that this is like the Lincoln origin story, right? Almost, kind of. And what he just said was, you know, Lincoln, the president, knew about these Lincolns and wrote to them, and you know, learned as much as he could. Pretty cool stuff. That's gonna do it for today. I'm gonna head on and get the kids. See ya. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and all that other stuff, and we'll see you later.